I'm Alex Valbergs.
And I'm Paul Barchitta.
And this is another edition of the Weekly Catch. We're back after spring break, and the March Madness starts tomorrow. It's time to get those brackets out, and we're just going to go region by region and tell us who we think is going to make it to Atlanta, to the Final Four. And we're going to jump right into the Midwest bracket. Louisville is the number one seed in this bracket. Mm-hmm. They won the Big East tournament. They were tied for the regular season Big East lead, and they were rewarded with the number one overall seed. Mm-hmm. I like Louisville all the way through this bracket. As much as I hate it, I'm an Orange fan. Right. And I hate Louisville. They beat us bad, but I don't know who puts up a big fight versus them. I got them going to the Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. They're going to beat Colorado State. They're going to beat North Carolina A&T. St. Louis and Oregon, I've got coming out of that second round. I really think Oregon got disrespected. They got a 12 seed. Oregon almost won the Pac. They won the Pac-12 postseason tournament. They were 25th in the nation, and they got a 12 seed. It doesn't make any sense. But St. Louis is a really tough team coming out of the A-10. I'd like them to beat Oregon, but then lose to Louisville next weekend in the Sweet 16. Right. The bottom half of the bracket, Memphis over St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's is one of the weakest teams in this field. I don't really agree with them getting an 11 seed. I think Virginia deserved to be in the tournament more than they did. But I got Memphis beating them. I got Tom Izzo's Spartans beating Memphis, though. And then Doug McDermott and Creighton against Duke in that second round. I think McDermott is a really good player, but I don't know if he's going to be enough to beat Coach K and his Blue Devils. So I got Duke, Michigan State, St. Louis, Louisville, Sweet 16. Ultimately, like I said, Louisville beats St. Louis. I think that'll be a tougher game than most people think. Most people don't know St. Louis is a very good team.
Very underrated.
They're a 4 seed. This has got to be one of the higher seeds they've ever had in their school's history. Definitely. And then that bottom half, Michigan State, Duke, that's going to be a great game. Coach K versus Izzo. But ultimately, I think the toughness of Michigan State, and they were more tested in the Big Ten this year. That was a better conference. So Louisville, Michigan State, and I got Louisville, the Big East champs, beating Michigan State, going to the Final Four.
I can agree with you. I can agree with you. I do have Louisville making, eventually winning this bracket. And the one thing I agree with most of your bracket. The one thing I could honestly say, I like Oklahoma State instead of Oregon. I like Marcus Smart, one of the top freshmen in the country. I really think that he can, in Oklahoma State, pull through against Oregon.
He might be the best freshman in the country.
Now Noel down, possibly. But like you said, but the Pac-12, obviously, it's not the Big Ten, it's not the Big East, it's not the strongest conference.
They won their conference.
You gotta give them respect.
12. Yeah. But ultimately, sometimes in this tournament, it's better to get a 12 than it is a 7 because, Oregon beats Oklahoma State. They play a 4. If you're a 7 and you win, you got to play the 2 seed, and it's a much harder. So 12 maybe isn't as bad as it is.
Yeah, I love Louisville. I eventually got them going to the Final Four. And like you said, one of the top matchups, I think, of the whole tournament is definitely going to be Michigan State, Duke. Like you said, Izzo, Steph Curry, and Duke. And you can never count out Coach K.
Duke's got all their seniors, and, Izzo.
And Duke, you
always can't ever count out Michigan State in the tournament.
Duke. Obviously, last year we saw Duke go down to Lehigh.
But Duke I think Duke's a lot stronger this year, especially with Ryan Kelly back. They're 18-1. They could very well make the run to the Final Four, but it'll be interesting to see. We're just guessing here. It's a crapshoot, especially this year with all the number ones going down. You never know what's going to happen.
Right. So now my bracket down in the West, I got Gonzaga playing Wichita State. Then I have Wisconsin playing Kansas State, Arizona, New Mexico, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and then I have Ohio State beating New Mexico. I have Gonzaga beating Wisconsin. So at the end of that bracket, I got Gonzaga, Ohio State, but I just feel like Ohio State is just going to pull out, being in that Big Ten conference. And Gonzaga, the last couple of weeks, they've been getting a lot of hype, being one of the top
first number one seed in school history. 10 years ago, Gonzaga was the Cinderella of all Cinderellas.
Yeah, Adam Morrison.
And now they're the number one seed and, one of a power in the West.
Right, exactly. So, so that's my West bracket. Can you agree with that?
Well, I like Gonzaga and Ohio State to get to the regional final, like you said. I love Deshaun Thomas and Aaron Craft. Ultimately, I have Ohio State winning that region also because that team, they were in the Final Four last year. Most of these kids were. They lost Solinger and a couple other guys, but just like Louisville and Ohio State both in the Final Four last year, I think that experience really helps them this year, brings them back. But earlier in that, I had Pitt losing to the Zags. I think Pitt can win a game just with their defense. Right. Wisconsin, Kansas State should be a really interesting matchup. There's so many great coaches in college. Right. Bo Ryan, Bruce Weber. think that'll be an interesting matchup. That's hard to call, but ultimately I'd pick Ryan because I like Wisconsin. They always play great defense. I actually got Belmont beating Arizona.
Really?
Just we were talking about the Pac-12 not that strong. You got to pick some upsets every once in a while. Belmont's made an upset or two in the past. But then I ultimately have them losing to New Mexico.
Right, New Mexico.
I got Iowa State beating Notre Dame because I thought Notre Dame was one of the weaker teams in the Big East to make it. Okay. But Ohio State, either way, I think Ohio State beats the winner of that game. Yeah. And I don't know that much about New Mexico. I know that they were really good in the Mountain West, and that's actually a stronger conference than people think. But I got Ohio State and the Zags advancing to the regional final. Right. Ohio State coming out on top.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think
Louisville, Ohio State.
Ohio State in the national semi. I really think that making the Final Four last year is going to help them out with experience. And
just losing Solinger, he's a great player.
With Deshaun Thomas has really filled that role.
I love Thomas.
Kraft is a leader. He might be the best on-ball defender in college. Right. And not a lot of people like him though.
Playing in that, I know, I can agree with you, but playing again that Big Ten, almost the SEC of college basketball.
Oh yeah, the Big Ten was the best conference in basketball. Moving on to the South, KU is in Kansas is the #1 seed in this region. Georgetown is the #2 seed. Ultimately, I got Kansas and going to the Sweet 16, along with VCU. Who we knew about 2 years ago, Shaka Smart and his Rams. Florida and Georgetown. I think Georgetown beats Florida. I think VCU pulls the upset on Kansas like they did 2 years ago. And the regional final is VCU, Georgetown. And I think the regular season Big East champs, the Hoyas, move on to Atlanta. Couple interesting matchups earlier in the tournament that I think could happen. Kansas, UNC, that 1 versus 8. Yeah. Roy Williams playing Bill Self. They have a lot of history together. VCU, Michigan, I think Shaka Smart, he plays that press kind of like Louisville does. He's always trying to apply pressure to the guy who's with the ball. And Michigan has, Trey Burke, who's a National Player of the Year candidate, and Tim Hardaway Jr. So it'll be interesting to see if those guys that can handle the ball can, get by VCU's press. But ultimately, I think VCU wins that game. Okay. And then Minnesota, I got a slight upset over UCLA. I'm not crazy about either team. It's 11 versus 6, so in numbers, it's an upset. But I think Florida beats Minnesota, and Georgetown, as I said, goes to the regional final. Yeah. So, I know you don't have Georgetown, do you?
I have them going to the regional semifinal, but eventually I just think Malcolm Moore in Kansas just upset.
Yeah, he also might be one of the best freshmen.
He's one of the best freshmen.
He's going to be a top 2 pick.
Freshmen, they come a lot. So, like I said, Kansas over Georgetown. I like Michigan, but I feel like just Kansas.
Michigan they're so inconsistent.
Right. They could be the top team in the country. We've seen them being up there.
They have been.
They have been, and they just, just being too inconsistent. And like you said, just not coming under pressure. So, not playing under pressure.
Well, it's gonna be a tough bracket for them.
So then in the East, I have Indiana advancing. I have Syracuse advancing, I have Butler advancing, and I have Miami advancing. So, like you said, you're a big Cuse fan. I personally think that Indiana is going to beat Cuse.
It's going to be a tough game. I know that Cuse is going to they're going to have a tough game with UNLV and Anthony Bennett the game before. But you like Indiana?
I like Indiana a lot, because like I said, they've been in the spotlight all season. Not like Syracuse hasn't, but I just don't think that James Sutherland, who's been hot and cold, when he's hot, he's one of the best players in the country. When he's cold, Syracuse kind of suffers a little bit, the whole team. Yeah,
well, I picked Cuse just because I'm hoping that no one's expecting anything from them right now, and that's when they're at their best.
They're not under pressure, right?
They're not under pressure. They were under pressure in the Big East tournament, and ultimately they failed against Louisville. They were up 13. They were up 16 at one point, and they blew that game. So now no one's expecting them to go that far, and that's when I think they're at their best is when expectations are low.
I can agree with you there. So then, Miami, I love Miami.
Yeah, I know we both love Miami.
I love Miami. So, I mean, just they're so fast, and they've been in the spotlight. I was the big upset this year with Duke. But, Shane Larkin, one of my favorite players to watch this season. He's just so athletic. And
Larkin might be the best at the pick and roll right now in all of basketball. Yeah. So, I know we both like Miami to advance to this Final Four.
Final Four, yes.
Yeah, that's usually a football school. There'll be something for Hurricanes basketball, but a little something that I just recently found out a couple months ago that Jim Larrañaga is the coach of Miami now.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I was wondering how Miami's basketball program got so good so quickly, but Jim Larrañaga was the guy that coached George Mason when they made that Final Four run. So this guy obviously knows what he's doing. And they're not a young team. They've got all upperclassmen, and this might be their last shot, so they're hungry. And I like Miami. I got Miami beaten. I got them beating Q, so you got them beating Indiana.
Yes, and then I got them eventually beating Kansas to get to the championship game. I got Louisville, Kansas.
I have Miami beating Georgetown, and we both have Miami, Louisville.
Right.
And we think Louisville comes out on top.
I think we could both agree with that.
Yeah, if Louisville plays the defense that they can play, and Russ Smith plays at the top of the game, and Siva in the Big East tournament played some of the best basketball of his season, and that's when they're really tough to beat.
And another reason why I want to see Miami win is because we know about Louisville, we know about Kansas, Ohio State, Duke. These teams have been on the map the last couple of years. Miami has not been on the map in the basketball scene. So it's been thinking of a football school. So now considering them in the Final Four, I think that's just the great thing about college basketball that in a couple of years. And I also like the matchup Russ Smith versus Shane Larkin.
Yeah, that'll be really fun to see.
So that should be good. So.
Just one more question before. How quickly do you think your bracket's going to get busted? Because mine's probably done by
tomorrow.
Friday.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Friday at about 2 p.m.
Yeah,
I'm going to throw all this out.
Yeah, this is, it's fun. I feel, a bunch of kids in my floor
it's always
doing
fun.
it.
Even people that don't like basketball, they love the tournament. I'm excited. This is my favorite sports weekend of the year.
It's the best,
But for Paul Barchitta, I'm Alex Valbergs. That's about it for this week, and this is the Weekly Catch, and we'll be back next week.